Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru is one of India's most misunderstood, least credited and least celebrated leaders. However, Mr. Nehru can be easily rated as the chief architect of modern-day India. We all are enjoying the fruits of his sacrifices, vision and planning. Jawaharlal Nehru was jailed multiple times during the Indian freedom movement, spending a total of about 9 years, approximately 3,262 days, in British prisons between 1921 and 1945. Here is a summary of the periods when Nehru was imprisoned. First imprisonment, 1921 to 1922. Nehru was first imprisoned during the non-cooperation movement. He was jailed for about 6 months. Second, civil disobedience movement, 1930 to 1935. During the Salt Satyagraha and subsequent civil disobedience campaigns, Nehru was imprisoned multiple times, spending a total of around 2 years in jail during this period. Third, Quit India movement, 1942 to 1945. Nehru was arrested along with other Congress leaders after the launch of the Quit India movement in 1942. He spent nearly 3 years in prison during this period, his longest continuous imprisonment. Throughout his political career, Nehru faced imprisonment for his role in protests against British colonial rule, highlighting his deep commitment to the Indian independence struggle. Jawaharlal Nehru's major contributions to the Indian freedom movement were pivotal in shaping both the struggle for independence and the post-colonial nation. Nehru, a key figure in the Indian National Congress, worked alongside Mahatma Gandhi and other leaders to achieve independence from British rule. His contributions include: first, leadership in the Indian National Congress. Nehru emerged as a leader in the Congress Party, taking part in key movements such as the Non-Cooperation Movement, 1920 to 1922. Civil Disobedience Movement, 1930 to 1934. And Quit India Movement, 1942. He became Congress President multiple times, notably in 1929, when the Lahore session of the Congress, under his leadership, declared the goal of Purna Swaraj, complete independence, as India's official objective. This declaration led to the adoption of January 26, 1930, as India's Independence Day, celebrated across the country before actual independence in 1947. Second, advocate for complete independence. Nehru was an early proponent of complete independence from British rule. While some leaders initially sought dominion status, Nehru advocated for full sovereignty, which became the ultimate aim of the Indian freedom struggle. His commitment to total freedom was evident during the Lahore Congress session of 1929, where he helped pass the Purna Swaraj resolution, calling for complete independence. Third, role in mass movements. Nehru played a significant role in mobilizing the masses, particularly during the civil disobedience movement, 1930. He was deeply involved in the Salt Satyagraha, where he participated in protests against British salt laws. Nehru also led protests during the Quit India movement, 1942, which called for an immediate end to British rule. His active participation resulted in his imprisonment for several years, showing his unwavering dedication to the cause of independence. Fourth, advocacy for secularism and socialism. Nehru's vision for India's future was rooted in secularism and socialism. He consistently advocated for a nation that would be free from religious divisions and promote social equality. He emphasized economic self-reliance and the need for industrialization, laying the groundwork for India's future economic policies even before independence. Fifth, globalizing the freedom struggle. Nehru's international exposure and understanding of global politics helped him position India's freedom struggle within the broader context of anti-colonial movements around the world. He used international forums and engaged with global leaders to draw attention to India's fight for freedom, emphasizing the universal right to self-determination. Nehru built international solidarity, which helped pressure the British government to consider Indian demands. Sixth, youth leader and mobilizer. Nehru was seen as a leader of the younger generation within the Congress and was deeply popular among India's youth. He inspired a new wave of young Indians to join the struggle for freedom, appealing to their desire for radical change and modernization. Seventh, bridge between Gandhi and Congress. Nehru, while deeply influenced by Mahatma Gandhi's ideology of non-violence, also represented the more radical elements within Congress that sought quicker action. He served as a bridge between Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence and the more aggressive, younger faction that sometimes sought a more confrontational approach to British rule. He respected Gandhi's leadership but brought in ideas of socialism and modernization, which were essential for building post-independent India. 8th, opposition to partition. Nehru was opposed to the idea of partition, although he ultimately agreed to it when it became clear that it was the only way to avoid large-scale communal violence. His primary concern was to maintain the unity of India, but he realized that the demands for a separate Muslim state could not be reconciled within a united India. 9th, contribution to constitution drafting, post-independence vision. Even before independence, Nehru contributed to envisioning a modern, democratic state. He headed the Constituent Assembly's Advisory Committee, which laid the groundwork for India's post-independence constitution, focusing on democracy, secularism, and civil liberties. 10th, negotiating independence. Nehru played a key role in the final negotiations with the British government leading to India's independence. As a leader of the Congress Party, he was involved in the talks with British officials, including the Cabinet Mission of 1946 and the discussions that ultimately resulted in the Indian Independence Act of 1947. Nehru's contributions to the Indian freedom movement were both ideological and practical. He was a leader who combined his dedication to the cause of independence with a clear vision for the future of India as a secular, democratic, and modern state. Through his leadership in Congress, mass movements, and international diplomacy, Nehru became a central figure in India's long struggle for freedom and its post-independence nation-building. At the time of independence in 1947, India was significantly backward in many socio-economic aspects due to centuries of British colonial rule. The colonial administration primarily exploited India's resources for Britain's benefit, resulting in the stagnation of key sectors like agriculture, industry, education, and healthcare. At the time of independence, India was economically and socially backward, with a fragile agrarian economy, underdeveloped industrial base, poor infrastructure, low literacy, inadequate healthcare, and widespread poverty. The colonial economy left India with weak institutions and systems, making the task of nation-building extremely challenging. While India possessed vast potential in terms of natural resources and human capital, the country started from a position of severe disadvantage. The post-independence leaders, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, aimed to modernize India through a combination of state-led industrialization, planned development, and efforts to address social inequalities. However, the backwardness of 1947 meant that India faced a long and arduous road to development. Jawaharlal Nehru is widely regarded as the chief architect of modern India due to his pivotal role in shaping the nation's political, economic, and social structures after independence. As India's first Prime Minister from 1947 to 1964, Nehru laid the foundation for the country's development in several key areas. He played a critical role in shaping modern India after its independence in 1947. Some of his key contributions include: first, building a secular democracy. Nehru was committed to establishing a democratic and secular state, ensuring that India became a pluralistic nation where people of all religions could coexist peacefully. He laid the foundation of India as a parliamentary democracy with a strong focus on civil liberties and individual rights. Second, economic planning and industrialization. Nehru advocated for a mixed economy with both public and private sectors. He introduced a series of 5-year plans aimed at industrialization and modernization, focusing on heavy industries, infrastructure, and scientific research. This strategy led to the development of major sectors like steel, energy, and transportation. Third, non-aligned movement. Nehru was one of the founding leaders of the non-aligned movement, positioning India as neutral during the Cold War. He advocated for peaceful coexistence and refused to align India with any superpower bloc, instead promoting diplomacy and cooperation with newly independent nations in Africa and Asia. Fourth, education and science. Nehru was a strong proponent of education and scientific advancement. Under his leadership, institutions like the Indian Institutes of Technology, IIT, and the Indian Institutes of Management, IIM, were established. He believed in the power of science and technology to drive progress and pushed for widespread educational reforms. Many giant corporates around the world are led by alumni of IIT and IIM. Fifth, social reform and modernization. Nehru aimed to create a more equitable society by introducing reforms that focused on eradicating traditional practices like caste discrimination and child marriage. He supported land reforms to redistribute land to the poor and was committed to improving the status of women through legal reforms. Sixth, foreign policy and international relations. Nehru's foreign policy was based on the principles of nonviolence and peaceful coexistence, influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. He advocated for disarmament, decolonization, and resolving disputes through dialogue. His leadership helped India become a significant voice in global affairs, especially in the post-colonial world. Jawaharlal Nehru implemented several key policies that shaped India's social, economic, and political landscape in its early years after independence. These policies reflect his vision for a modern, secular, and democratic India. Some of the major policies Nehru implemented include: first, economic policies. Planned economy and 5-year plans. Nehru adopted a socialist-inspired model, implementing a series of 5-year plans to guide India's economic development. These plans focused on industrialization, infrastructure, and self-reliance. The first 5-year plan, 1951 to 1956, focused on agriculture and irrigation, while the second, 1956 to 1961, emphasized heavy industries like steel, energy, and machinery. Mixed economy. Nehru's policy combined elements of socialism and capitalism, establishing a mixed economy where both public and private sectors coexisted. Strategic sectors like banking, steel, and energy were under government control, while the private sector was encouraged to grow in other areas. Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. This policy emphasized the importance of public sector involvement in industries and aimed to ensure rapid industrialization to boost economic growth, especially in core industries. Second, social policies. Secularism. Nehru implemented policies that emphasized secularism, ensuring that the state remained neutral in matters of religion. He aimed to create a society where all religious communities were treated equally and the influence of religion in politics was minimized. Abolition of caste discrimination. Nehru supported legislation that aimed to reduce caste-based inequalities. This included the Untouchability Offences Act of 1955, which made the practice of untouchability illegal. Women's rights. Nehru's policies promoted gender equality. The Hindu Code bills passed under his leadership granted women the right to inherit property and allowed for easier access to divorce, challenging centuries-old patriarchal norms. Third, education and science. Establishment of institutes of higher learning. Nehru prioritized education and scientific research. He helped establish institutions like the Indian Institutes of Technology, IIT, Indian Institutes of Management, IIM, and the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR. Universal primary education. Nehru's government worked on expanding access to primary education, aiming to build an educated citizenry for the future of India. Scientific research. Nehru pushed for a scientific temper in India's development and established several research institutions, including the Atomic Energy Commission in 1948 to foster advancements in science and technology. Fourth, foreign policy. Non-aligned movement. Nehru's foreign policy was centered around maintaining India's sovereignty by staying non-aligned during the Cold War. India, under Nehru, became one of the founding members of the non-aligned movement, which sought to stay neutral from the power struggles between the USA and the USSR. Panchayal principles. Nehru, alongside China, formulated the Panchayal, or the 5 Principles of Peaceful Coexistence, in 1954. These principles emphasized mutual respect for sovereignty, non-aggression, non-interference, equality, and peaceful coexistence between nations. Decolonization support. Nehru strongly supported decolonization efforts around the world and worked to strengthen diplomatic relations with other newly independent countries, especially in Asia and Africa. Fifth, agricultural policies. Community Development Program. Nehru launched the Community Development Program in 1952 to improve rural infrastructure, education, and healthcare, aiming to uplift rural areas where most of India's population lived. Land reforms. Nehru's government implemented land reforms that sought to abolish the zamindari, landlord, system and redistribute land to tenants and small farmers. However, the effectiveness of these reforms varied from state to state. 6th, defense and national security. Strengthening of armed forces. Despite his commitment to peace, Nehru oversaw the expansion and modernization of India's defense capabilities, particularly in response to external threats like the 1962 Sino-Indian War. Establishment of DRDO, Defense Research and Development Organization. Nehru founded DRDO in 1958 to advance India's defense capabilities, particularly in areas of research and development for military technology. 7th, institution building. Nehru was responsible for establishing many institutions that became pillars of Indian democracy, including Election Commission of India, to conduct free and fair elections. Planning Commission, formed in 1950 to coordinate India's 5-year plans and economic policy. All India Institute of Medical Sciences, for advanced medical research and education. National Science Policy. Nehru placed great importance on scientific research as a tool for national development. These policies helped lay the foundation for modern India's political and economic structure, with lasting impacts on governance, economy, society, and India's role in global affairs. Jawaharlal Nehru can be easily considered the chief architect of modern India due to his foundational role in shaping the country's political, economic, and social trajectory after independence. His leadership during the early years of India's independence laid the groundwork for the nation's development and growth.